Colombo did not rise quietly. It grew out of tension, ambition, and a constant struggle for control. For centuries, empires circled the island of Sri Lanka not just for its beauty or its resources, but because Colombo stood at the crossroads of the world. It was the gateway between East and West, a port where fortunes were made and power was sharpened. But behind the glitter of trade and progress, fear shaped its streets just as deeply as prosperity did. Every empire that claimed Colombo left behind layers of influence, conflict, and unanswered questions. How did a once modest coastal settlement become a center of global competition? Why have its people lived under cycles of hope and anxiety? And why does Colombo remain a place where power attracts outsiders, shapes politics, and sparks tension even today? This is the story of a city built on opportunity and overshadowed by struggle. A city where every rise comes with a price, and every chapter reveals a new battle between ambition and uncertainty. Power, fear, and the rise of Colombo begin with a question that stretches across centuries. How does a single city become the beating heart of an entire region's ambitions, anxieties, and conflicts? Colombo, today known for its skyline of glass towers and its busy port filled with ships from across the world, did not emerge overnight. Its rise is the product of geography, empire, trade, and political struggle. It is the story of how a strategically placed settlement became a crossroads of global power and how the forces that shaped it created waves of opportunity and instability that are still felt today. Colombo's ascent is inseparable from the Indian Ocean, one of the world's oldest highways of trade. For centuries, sailors from Arabia, East Africa, Southeast Asia, and India rode the monsoon winds across this vast sea, stopping where they could find safe harbors, fresh water, and valuable markets. The southwestern coast of Sri Lanka offered all of this, and Colombo became a natural rest stop long before it appeared on European maps. Its early evolution was quiet but steady as merchants recognized that the city's location made it a perfect gateway between East and West. Arab traders in particular became influential, helping develop Colombo into a thriving port where cinnamon, precious stones, and exotic goods attracted buyers from distant lands. But trade, as always, draws interest from powerful empires, and Colombo's fortunes shifted dramatically with the arrival of Europeans. The Portuguese were the first to seize the city in the early 1500s. To them, Colombo was not just a useful port, it was a doorway into controlling the lucrative spice trade. Cinnamon from Sri Lanka was highly prized in Europe, and whoever controlled Colombo controlled an essential choke point in this trade network. The Portuguese built fortresses, established administrative posts, and used both diplomacy and force to secure their influence. But their rule bred resentment among local kingdoms, particularly the Kingdom of Kandy, which refused to accept foreign dominance. This tension would become a recurring theme in Colombo's story, as every empire that sought to control the port faced resistance from the island's interior power centers. In the 1600s, the Dutch arrived, eager to replace the Portuguese and take control for themselves. They expanded the fortifications and modernized the city, reshaping Colombo into a more organized colonial hub. It became a place where wealth flowed outward to Europe, but where power remained tightly concentrated in foreign hands. These overlapping eras of European control created a pattern that defined Colombo's rise. Every new ruler recognized the city's importance, and every ruler relied on a mixture of economic pressure and military force to maintain authority. The result was a city built on both opportunity and fear. Local communities adapted to survive, some aligning with occupiers for personal gain, others resisting quietly or openly. The port flourished, but the cost of that prosperity was the steady erosion of local autonomy. When the British took over in the late 1700s, Colombo entered a new phase of expansion. The British Empire viewed the city not just as a trading hub, but as a strategic outpost for its growing dominance over the Indian Ocean. Under British rule, Colombo became the capital of Ceylon, and its infrastructure was rapidly modernized. Railways, roads, administrative buildings, and plantations all became part of the colonial economy. The port transformed into one of the busiest in Asia, fueled by the export of tea, rubber, and coconut. The British also expanded the city inward, developing neighborhoods, business districts, and government zones that still define its urban layout today. Colombo's population grew as people from rural areas moved to the city seeking jobs, education, and stability. Yet even as it grew, the shadow of fear remained. British rule was not peaceful. It relied on strict laws, surveillance, and the suppression of revolts. Nationalist sentiment simmered, eventually boiling over into organized movements seeking independence. Colombo became both the center of administration and the center of resistance, a place where speeches, strikes, and protests slowly built the momentum for freedom. Sri Lanka gained independence in 1948, and Colombo began a new chapter. The city retained its role as the political and economic center of the country, and the decades that followed were filled with hopes of prosperity. But the same concentration of power that had fueled Colombo's rise also planted the seeds of future conflict. Political decisions made in the capital did not always reflect the needs of diverse ethnic and regional communities across the island. These tensions grew deeper and more divisive, eventually erupting into one of the longest civil wars in modern history. Colombo was not the battleground in the early years, but it was the place where decisions were made, policies were drafted, and inequalities were deepened. Over time, the city itself became a target. Bombings, assassinations, checkpoints, and military operations became part of daily life. Fear moved from the margins into the heart of Colombo. Ordinary people navigated streets marked by security barriers and constant surveillance. The city remained powerful, but its power felt fragile, threatened by the violence unfolding around it. The Civil War lasted nearly 3 decades, reshaping Colombo in profound ways. Development slowed in some areas and accelerated in others. Secure zones became symbols of political privilege, while poorer communities faced economic hardship and uncertainty. Yet even in this environment, the city continued to draw investors, workers, and migrants. Its port remained vital, its businesses kept expanding, and its institutions remained central to national governance. This resilience became part of Colombo's identity, a city that moved forward even while surrounded by turmoil. When the war finally ended in 2009, a new transformation began. Peace opened the door for massive urban development projects. Skyscrapers, luxury hotels, and shopping centers began rising across the skyline. International investors arrived with ambitious plans, and the government sought to position Colombo as a world-class commercial hub. At the center of these ambitions was the Colombo Port City Project, a massive development funded largely by China. Built on reclaimed land, the project promised to reshape Colombo's future with a global financial district, modern infrastructure, and new commercial zones. But these promises came with new questions about sovereignty, debt, geopolitical influence, and the growing presence of Chinese interests in the Indian Ocean. Power, once again, became the defining feature of Colombo's narrative. The city found itself at the intersection of India-China rivalry, regional security concerns, and debates about national control. The modern rise of Colombo mirrors its past. Great powers see it as a strategic asset, and the struggle to control its future continues. Internally, the city faces challenges linked to inequality, governance, and public trust. Protests erupted in recent years as citizens demanded accountability, economic reform, and relief from financial crises. Scenes of crowds gathering near government buildings demanding change reminded the world that even a modern skyline cannot hide deep structural problems. Fear resurfaced, not from war this time, but from economic instability, shortages, and political turmoil. Yet Colombo also demonstrated its enduring resilience. Communities supported one another during crises, businesses adapted, and citizens continued pushing for transparency and reform. The city remained the heartbeat of the nation, even when that heartbeat grew strained. The story of Colombo's rise is not a straightforward journey. It is a cycle of power gained and lost, fear imposed and resisted, and ambition renewed across generations. It is shaped by its geography, its people, and the global forces that continue to converge upon it. As Colombo looks toward the future, it stands at a crossroads once again. Its port remains one of the most important in Asia. Its infrastructure continues to modernize. Its people remain determined to build a more stable and equitable society. But the balance between power and fear continues to shape its destiny. Foreign influence, political rivalries, economic pressures, and social tensions all play critical roles in what happens next. Colombo can rise further, becoming a regional powerhouse and a symbol of progress. Or it can fall into old patterns of dependence, conflict, and inequality. The path it chooses will depend on decisions made in government halls, business boardrooms, and street-level communities alike. The forces that raised Colombo from a quiet coastal settlement into a global crossroads are still at work. Power continues to attract interest, fear continues to manifest in new forms, and the struggle for control remains as alive as ever. Colombo's journey is a reminder that cities are not just buildings, roads, and ports. They are living reflections of the ambitions, fears, hopes, and conflicts of the people who shape them. Today, Colombo stands as a symbol of both opportunity and challenge, a city forged by centuries of struggle and shaped by the tides of history. Its rise is ongoing, and its story is far from finished. Colombo's journey has always been defined by struggle, ambition, and the constant presence of forces far larger than the city itself. From ancient traders to colonial empires, from civil conflict to global economic competition, every era has left its marks on Colombo's streets, its politics, and its identity. Yet through every disruption, the city has refused to collapse. It has rebuilt, adapted, and pushed forward, driven by people who continue to believe in its potential even when the odds seem impossible. Today, Colombo stands at another turning point. Towers rise where old fortresses once stood, new alliances form where old empires once ruled, and the balance of global power once again converges on its harbor. But with opportunity comes uncertainty. Economic pressures, political tensions, foreign influence, and social inequality all compete for space in a city already stretched by history. Whether Colombo becomes a symbol of renewal or a warning from the past depends on the choices made now, choices about leadership, transparency, unity, and how power is shared rather than hoarded. Colombo's rise has never been smooth, but it has always been resilient. And its story is not one of defeat, but of endurance. The next chapter will decide whether that endurance becomes the foundation of a stronger future or the beginning of another cycle of fear and struggle. The city's destiny is still unfolding, carried by the hopes and decisions of those who call Colombo home.